Hi, it's Kathy Haines, and I'm here today with Michael Clapp. He is a local architect in our area, and his company is called SCHEMATA Studio. I was introduced to Michael through his O. Henry magazine article recently where they detailed everything that went into him building or rebuilding, I guess, the barn that we're sitting in today. And I was so amazed that I said, I have to interview you and introduce you to people that I know because I think he's fascinating. So, one of the first things I want to ask Michael is what do you think is your biggest challenge facing you in residential design?
Sure. So with residential design, it's a very intimate process, and I absolutely love working with clients to envision what their ambitions for a home might be. And in custom architecture, every project is uniquely different. It's suited to that client, whether it's an individual, a couple, a family, and really hearing their story and blending that into the design of the home, both from an exterior form standpoint, but also the way that the interior spaces flow and connect to one another. It's fascinating to kind of go through that process with each, individual client and hear their stories and really let those be expressed within the architecture.
Well, I love that. And I think we'll all agree that since the pandemic, the heart is the home, and people are even more excited about coming home every day and having it be their, enclave and their paradise. And they want it exactly the way they want it. Some want it, with an open floor plan, and some don't want that anymore. But everybody's ideas of what home is are very different. So I love that you focus on exactly what they're looking for.
You're exactly right. And I think the idea of home is evolving, has evolved from the pandemic, but just as a natural course. We're seeing more time spent at home, people wanting different functionality out of certain spaces or a flexibility woven into spaces that might have been more rigid before.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking not only about how we use those spaces, but how they feel, what textures are in those spaces. And as you can tell from the barn residents here, a lot of texture involved, and I think that's what makes the experience of home all the richer.
Yes. Well, tell everybody that hasn't read the O. Henry article yet, but I hope that they will, a little bit about what you've done right here.
Absolutely. So this barn was built back in 1950 or around that time. So we're about 75 years old now, and it's on family property. So my dad and uncle grew up out here. My grandparents lived right next door. And for years, I saw this barn and this structure and the entire site and context, and just thought there's something really neat that can happen here. So it currently sits with a large field fronting the road, and it just feels incredibly pastoral and calm out here. And yet, I can make it back into Greensboro to work with clients there in less than 20 minutes. So people often say, "Oh, you're out in Witsit. That must be a really really long drive." Not at all.
No, not with the highway. I guess another thing I would like to ask is what do you advise clients that are interested in a certain type of home and they're struggling to find exactly what they need and what they're looking for on an architect's website? What would you recommend to them?
And that's something that I deal with constantly, but it's a challenge that can be overcome. So a lot of times people will think about a project that they're interested in starting, whether that is a new build on some land that would be kind of a completely new project, or they have an existing home and they're wondering how can I renovate this or reimagine some of the spaces or the external form to kind of evolve with our the family's needs or what have you. And so going on an architect's website is a great first step. That's the first step in getting to know the architect or the architectural firm that you might work with, and you're going to get a sense for the way that they approach projects. Hopefully, that website tells a bit of the story about how they think about design and how they imagine working with clients. to help them bring that vision to life. Now, one of the things that people often might be distracted by is, they'll see kind of the finished photography, and either A, they fall in love with it, or they say, that's not quite what I'm looking for. And I think it's very easy to sort of quickly move on, right? In today's day and age, where we're just bombarded with images, we know that the perfect image will be out there, but there's a bit of a fallacy there in terms of working with an architect. As I mentioned, that process of creating a relationship of trust between the designer and the client is really important. And I think as people do explore a website, or actually meet in person with the architect, go and explore one of the projects that the architect has done with them, you'll start to glean, okay, it's more about how they approach the design. So it's not the final product, because that's going to be very specific to that client. No one's going to have the exact same home. With custom architecture, it really is catered to that specific client. So seeing on a website or seeing in an architect's project an element or a space that you say, there's something about this that just feels really good, it feels right, whether that's proportions, the colors and textures of the space, the circulation and the flow. That's what you really want to be looking at when trying to find an architect that's going to be right for your project.
And I think you can go across the spectrum because, obviously you're a think out of the box architect, which I love. But if someone came to you and wanted to really do something different, but in a more traditional way, you could do that as well.
That's right. And I do try to communicate to clients, that my contemporary approach to design is really kind of, it lends itself to the way that we live today. So traditional architecture was designed around the way that we lived at that time, much like contemporary architecture responds to today's challenges and unique opportunities. And so I do have clients sort of ask that question, or pose the question of, well, I see that some of your work is very modern, and they might be afraid, okay, well, I've been asked, well, is it just going to be a glass box? And I say, of course not, because it really needs to suit the site, its context, the client and their needs. And I love the idea of blending an existing context with sort of a new idea of how that space will be used. In the architectural realm, we have our jargon, and the very fancy word for it is adaptive reuse, and that's really what happened here within the barn. So we adapted what was used as a very utilitarian structure into a very cozy, but also at the same time industrial, modern aesthetic for a residence and my working studio.
And I saw one of your designs up in the mountains of North Carolina, which was incredible. And, so I know you can do things all across the spectrum. Well, being in real estate for 26 years, I have people come to me asking for all kinds of resources. They sometimes want a handyman, sometimes want a plumber, sometimes want someone to help them move. And then sometimes they want to stay exactly where they are, especially if they have a really low interest rate, or their house is paid off and they love the neighborhood, but they need to expand or, do something different to the space. And so you are exactly what the doctor ordered when someone is going to call me and ask about that.
Well, I love that you do act as that resource for a homeowner client, right? And I really make an effort to, from my architectural training, from kind of what I do on a daily basis, I can sort of support how you assist clients by helping them envision what is possible within a home. So if someone, like you said, really loves where they are and are looking for a bit of a change, something that just adds a bit of functionality or comfort to a space, that's sort of what architects do. We help kind of visually represent what is possible within that space, and we can kind of talk through it, talk about the possibilities, and even render what that possible vision might look like before even proceeding.
Sure. So I'm going to address the elephant in the room. I know people are wondering, what does an architect cost?
That is a great question, and it varies, of course. Never an easy answer. but I do get that question often, and there's sort of an inherent fear in people's minds that, oh
Sure.
gosh, as soon as you say the A word, the dollar signs start skyrocketing. In a very basic way, I think people often overlook the fact that when we look at how we price our fee, it can be based on a range of things. So it can be a percentage of the construction cost of the project. It could be based on the square footage of a new home. When you get into pricing a fee, an architectural fee on a remodel, a renovation, and adaptive reuse, it gets a little bit more complicated because there are different elements that are not straightforward in terms of just going from a square footage size standpoint. But often, I use the analogy of sales tax, right? So sales tax people just already just they know it's going to be built in. That's 7% additional on anything you buy, and
Right.
then I try to interpolate how that translates to an architectural fee, but also what you're getting for that, what the value is. So an architectural fee for a residential project can range anywhere from 8 to 10% or more, depending on if there's a high level of service where we're really getting into the fine grained details of every bit of texture that you're going to see and feel every day. All the way down to a lighter touch where really we're re-envisioning kind of the overall broad strokes moves of the house. Sometimes homeowners really want to take ownership of some of the finer details themselves. And I'm happy to work in whichever capacity an owner might like. So that percentage, really, the value that comes out of working with an architect, though, is what I harp on, because we can foresee some of the challenges and the issues that they're going to face during construction. When working on a home, that's it's one of the biggest expenses that someone's going to have in their lifetime, potentially. And so it's really important to get it right the first time. So we love being able to get in there and think about the constructability of something, what the sequencing of design needs to be. We also help kind of figure out what the cohesion of the parts and pieces are, right? Too often, I'll see an existing home where it feels very disjointed. Maybe there were smaller renovations throughout the years, and it's very kind of piecemeal, and it's very visible.
Seen that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And an architect is able to really think about a project in a holistic way, such that we bring harmony to the entire design, so that it feels like it was all meant to be and it functions properly.
Well, don't you guys want to work with Michael on your next project? I know I do. And I'm going to have all of his information and mine down below for you to access, including Michael's website. Thank you for listening.